Okay, so now that I'm working on the little fiddly bits, working on finishing up this instrument, I generally like to bring these kinds of things back into something like a good kitchen counter or somewhere where I've got something flat and steady. So in front of me, I actually am using for this right now, in this space, I've got a music stand which is nice and flat, a notebook, and I've got a couple of grits of sandpaper. I've got some 80 grit so that I can work some of the heavy stuff that I need to get off of the end of that, the nut, and then I've got some 320 to be able to polish it up a little bit. Also got a ruler, never know when you might use one of those, and I've got a package of strings that I can begin using for the guitar. These are Diodario EJ45, and it's from a 3-pack, but so I don't have the actual outer cover for it, but they're just a normal tension Diodario nylon string for classical guitars. I will use that to do my setup and intonation on the instrument, and to get a ballpark of what the sound of the guitar is going to be. And when I've got that all fine-tuned and ready to go, I'll swap those strings out for, I've got a set of Conde flamenco strings, because it is a flamenco guitar and it's going to somebody that wants to learn to play flamenco guitar. So I will swap those out and get those adjusting to the guitar itself. So these things that I have here to work with, we're going to start, and we're going to bring the top of this nut down where it'll be a little bit better for us going onto the guitar. Now I've got to take some material off the top of it. I've got a trash can over here, so when I've got too much material on the sandpaper, I can dump it and start over. So I'm going to get the other things out of the way. Don't need those moving. And this may be something that you might not like the smell of. This is a bone nut. It's not nylon. Nylon has a particular smell too. If you feel more comfortable wearing a mask, wear a mask. Try not to breathe it directly in. Which is why occasionally I am dumping it off in the trash can, because I don't need it flying around the room very much. Okay, so right now my leading edge is really close to where I want it to be. My back side is still really tall. So now I'm going to begin rolling it over this back edge. I don't need to take out all of it, just this top little quarter section here. So I'm working that. I'm holding it a little bit at an angle here so that I can get this edge. You'll need to check it every once in a while, make sure that you're removing it exactly where you want to remove it. And make adjustments. And you may begin sort of rolling it over a little bit so that it has a more consistent rounded edge rather than a straight beveled edge. This is more difficult on the music stand here than it would be on a consistent surface like a countertop or a bench top. Get the idea. Okay, so that's kind of where we're looking at. Got a rounded edge. This side goes towards the headstock, and this side goes towards the guitar body. I can now fine-tune these channels with some little needle files if I need to, and widen them out a little bit. Like this second one right here needs to be widened a little bit. They all need to get a little bit wider because we need to have the strings sit in them a little bit more comfortably. And we can now also round off our corner edges a little bit if we need to. A little. Polish that a little bit. Okay. Now, this is just to take those 80 grit scratches out. And polish this piece up just a little bit. It's just an aesthetic thing. There we go. As best as that's going to get right now. So, I know I need to remove just a little bit of material off the top of my saddle, so I'm going to go ahead and get in here and Move a little. I'm going to round it just a little bit too. Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop right there for just a moment and reset so that I can get a couple of strings out and start really looking at setup and what I need to do with the guitar here as well. Okay, so I have the nut in place and I have the saddle in place at its lowest setting right now, and I can look at it and double check how high my string is. So right now I'm sitting about 3 millimeters higher than I need to be on both ends. So I need to take about 3 millimeters off of the saddle side. But the nut side is really good. So I'm going to take my saddle out. This is why I did it with only 2 strings to start with. Okay, got enough leeway here, I can pull that out. Get the guitar out of the way. And I can remove the material. So like I said, I've got about 3 millimeters to remove here. So first thing I'm going to do is take a pencil and mark where I need to be. So total height on this side. Come to there. Okay, so there's enough material here that I need to remove that I'm going to saw that excess off and then again come back down to my line. So I'm still very high on this. Alright, I have the saddle back and we're going to fit it back on here. Set it at its lowest point, and we're going to double check our action. Okay, so we are currently at 1.5 both ends at the nut, and we are at 4.5 both ends at 12th fret. So I know I am not up to pitch yet. Okay, so that's ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and get all the strings on it, and then I can go ahead and fiddle with the nut. And then we will work on intonation. So I'll be back. Alright, got all the strings on it. I've just tuned it up to pitch a couple of times because the nylon strings, they tend to fluctuate and dip down. So the first test I do, and I already know my action is too high on the bass end. I need to bring it down a good 1.5 millimeters, 2 millimeters. But my first thing to do is actually to play each and every fret. The idea there is to make sure that there are no unwanted sounds coming out of the instrument. The next thing to do is then to check the intonation at your 12th fret, harmonic, and then also pushing the fret down. So some of them are going a little bit sharp when I push down on the fret. That will be somewhat alleviated when I take out the extra little bit that's necessary from the saddle. But then I'll also adjust that by slightly lengthening the string length here. In other words, I'm going to remove more from the front end of the saddle than the back end. And that will move that point back just a little bit and cause that 12th fret to be more in tune. The other thing that I'm going to do is I think that I'm going to add a little bit of material back here on the back side of the nut because it's kind of rocking a little bit. And what I'll do with that is I will take a thin piece of shell or bone or something and glue it on the back side of this, the side that's closer to the headstock, and then I will sand it so that it's only a fraction of a millimeter, just to take up that extra space. And I just feel like this is rocking a little bit. I don't know that it is, but it's not sitting flush against the fretboard right here. I can stick my fingernail in between on the top side, so I know that there's a little extra space there that I need to get rid of. And it may not be all the way across, it may just be right there. So that's how we do that portion. I think the sound is going to be good. It will need to settle in a little bit, and then also adjust as I go to make it right. So with the bass down here, I'm pretty happy with this without that extra bit, so I'm just going to mark it so that I can remove that side. I can cut it off and sand it the way I need it to be. So I'll get started on that, and then I'll show y'all that process of filing and intonating on that end. Alright, so here's my saddle. It looks pretty narrow and thin right now, right? Here's the bottom, treble, bass. So you can see there's just a little bit of a wedge shape, right? Okay, and if I turn it so you can see, I've adjusted a little bit over the top, right? So I've taken a little bit more off of this side than this side. I've still rounded, but I've removed more there. I kept my height here. I took off about 1.5 millimeters in order to get to that point. Okay. Now this is the front side. It's going to go towards the sound hole of the guitar, and I moved that point of contact back just a little bit to help with the intonation that I was worried about when I tuned up the strings the first time. The other thing that I'm going to need to do is, so I'm just going to slide this back on here. I took the tension off the strings just enough to be able to get the saddle out. So we slide that back into place. Right, it fits just perfectly right over the top of the strings, just like that, right under there. Now the other thing that I've noticed is that my third string sits really tall on the nut, so I'm afraid that it's just going to pop over. And in order to fix that, I have some needle files here. I'm just going to very carefully take this little triangle needle file. I'm going to go right into my little channel right here, and I'm going to move this down just a little bit so you can see. Right? I'm going to take my little needle file, and I'm just going to push one way and then the other. Just to widen that just a little. Get that string to sit in there a little bit better. Now no problem. Just takes a little bit. The rest of them look pretty good. I don't see any problems with those. So